Hi, everyone. We're here to go through the market adjustment and wage standardization process. You may hear this called the MAWS Committee. We trust you've had a chance to read the overview and watch the video from President Linkletter. Here with me are Tanya Burnside, the MHCP Vice President. I will introduce myself, Wayne Chacun, the Bargaining Chair and Treasurer for MHCP. We want to give a special thank you to Keely Richmond, our Executive Director, and Kevin McFarland, the Director of Administration and Finance, for all their hard work on this committee. So just a little bit of a background to do with the Market Adjustment and Wage Standardization Committee. During the last round of bargaining, we were taking 53 collective agreements and combining them down to 3 collective agreements. During this process, we uncovered that there were a lot of salary inequities for similar and even identical job classifications. During the last round of bargaining, it was apparent that we weren't going to get members' wages looked at during the bargaining process. So we agreed to set up a committee to deal with this afterwards. Initially, the Market Adjustment Fund was being offered at $20 million to be shared with MGU. The employer thought this would be enough, but we knew that it wouldn't be. We have many more classifications that MGU does not represent, and we knew that their interests would be very different than ours. Bargaining hard because of your strike vote, we were able to get the fund up to $32 million. In essence, this is what called off the strike back last May. In November, we started meeting to determine how this money would be dealt with. It has taken us until now to come up with the new wage scales that are being presented.
Thanks, Wayne. The committee's had a twofold approach when we finally got to meet together. There was a standardization and market adjustment. First, we had to standardize, as Wayne indicated, the amalgamation of all the collective agreements. And the standardization occurred within MHCP's bargaining units or our employer organizations. Once that was completed, we could then turn our focus to the market adjustments, where outside comparators, R&R issues, what you'll hear us say, which is recruitment and retention, Ontario West average, or OWA or OPA will be another familiar term that you'll hear throughout, and along with vacancy rates.
One of the first things we wanted to do with the $32 million that was being divvied up was to give all members a 3% market adjustment. That took place last October 1st, 2023, and it was for all classifications except for EMS, midwives, and perfusion, as those 3 groups were already receiving some market adjustments that took place outside of this fund.
As Wayne just indicated, the initial market adjustment, the 3% that occurred on October 1st with the exclusion of EMS, midwives, and perfusion, we were able to get the committee, the employer side, to agree to actually extend that date back to date of ratification for the contract, except for those 3 groups. What is not on the slide here, for those 3 groups, we were also able to have the employer agree to providing a lump sum payment to EMS, midwives, perfusion. Once all the costing is done and the wage scales have been completed and signed off, we will know that amount. But this amount is going to be based on per employee and not being prorated per EFT. So it's per employee. Every employee, whether you're full-time, part-time, or casual, will get a lump sum payment once all the final costing is completed. It's just amount we just don't have until that is done, unfortunately.
During the standardization process, we reviewed all the classifications that are in the salary scales and the job descriptions across all of the central table employers. These were then grouped and compared. We then grouped and compared like classifications. Some occupational groups were relatively easy to standardize. I mean, audiology, for example, virtually all of them were the same scales. So that one was relatively easy. But we had other groups, such as especially community, mental health and addictions, and social works, which were much more complex. Those three groups were we did classification groupings based on job requirements and responsibilities. The employer came up with these, and we reviewed them to see if they did fit. During this process, your MAHCP MAWS Committee was adamant that job descriptions and titles wouldn't change. There was a time when the employer was wanting to rewrite job descriptions. But we were adamant that there was a process laid out in the collective agreement that the employer must follow if they want to do this. Also, when looking at scales and job classifications, the salary scales where the most members sat was what was used. That's what we standardized to. If you had 200 workers and 180 were already making the same wage, that's what we standardized to. Those making less would then be brought up. And if you were making more, you could end up being red circled depending on what happened at the market adjustment table. Just going to do a little description here on red circling. And we're using the EKG scales here. We have general duty technologists of cardiology, and the majority of them are making the same wage. The majority are making the wage that starts at $28.28.7 and caps out at $37.84.4. But we have a couple classifications here that are making more. So when standardizing, some of them may be red circled. Now, one of the things that we were doing was nobody's wage was going to drop during this process. So if you were being paid on a scale that was higher than what's being standardized to, your wage won't go down. It will stay there until others catch up. Now, if someone had just started in the, say, the pediatric EKG technologist scale at Health Science Center, say they had just started and they're making $30.41, 41.8 cents, they won't go down. They'll be slotted in to step 2 above so that their wage doesn't go down. And that'll happen with all of these until we get to the 36.42, get slotted to the 37. But after that, there's not a spot to slot people. Somebody can't go to the 20-year step unless they've been working 20 years. That's something that is stipulated in the collective agreement. So those making 37.84.4 or 38.12.1, they will simply stay at that wage until others have caught up. If somebody's on the 20-year step, they also will not receive any general wage increases until others who are at the 20-year step have caught up. So that's what red circling's about. As we go, if you look through the collective agreement or the new wage scales, there aren't a lot of people who are going to be red circled. Thankfully, market adjustments helped reduce that number greatly.
Another part of standardization that we looked at were the differentials being maintained between our general duty, senior, charge, or CSLs or lead classifications. And we noticed that quite a few were below the 5% minimum. So again, we brought these to the employer's attention and they agreed to ensure that those who were below the 5% would be brought up to the 5%, and all of them varied. So the classifications that were brought up to a 5% differential are the MRI technologist, both senior and charge classifications, nuclear medicine technologist, both senior and charge classifications, radiation protection officers, both senior and charge classifications, radiation therapist, the senior classification, CT technologist, the senior classification, and finally the ultrasound technologist, both senior and charge classifications, will be brought up to maintain, have that minimum 5% differential between them. Important dates when we get into standardization that are listed on the screen: respiratory therapy and pharmacy. Their standardized rates will be applied April 1st, 2024, and all other occupations standardization will occur April 1st, 2023. We fought a lot over this date, as you know, in the MOU, it's stated October 1st, and we pushed the employer back as far as we could to get, you know, as much money as we could for our members going back. So again, just to reiterate that, respiratory therapy and pharmacy is standardized to April 1st, 2024. All other occupations, April 1st, 2023. Having some learned lessons from our last round of bargaining, we made sure the academic allowance and how standardization impacted those. So if you were receiving an academic allowance and the degree is now a requirement of your job classification, the allowance will be ceased or stopped if your new wage is higher than what you were receiving previously with your wage and academic allowance combined. This application of the academic allowance mostly applies to our community, mental health and addiction, and social work groupings. And through the employer's investigation, we've only currently found 2 people that this occurred. So please, if you have an academic allowance and the employer stops paying it and you feel that that is an error, please let us know by emailing the committee at info@mhcp.ca. That was not the intent of this committee on either both our side or the employer's side. So we want to ensure if that happens that it can be corrected quickly. So we're starting to eat up some of the pie here, breaking up the $32 million. So once standardization was completed, the cost of that was $4.73 million. So as you can see, we're slowly starting eating the $32 million. And with standardization complete, we could now move on to market adjustments.
So when we were looking at applying the remaining $11.4 million to market adjustments, we looked at all of the outstanding wage-related proposals from the last round of bargaining. We also assessed recruitment and retention issues, the Ontario West average, and when we use that term, we mean if you look at the wages for classifications in Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC, we're striving to have our Manitoba allied health workers be making the average of those. Not the highest, but not the lowest. So that's what we were pushing for. And we looked at vacancy rates. Initially, the employer was focused solely on vacancies, while we were also looking at our provincial comparators. I like to describe it as the employer only wants to fix a problem, while we also want to make sure problems don't happen. We want to prevent them before they actually do happen. One of the things we want to stress is that market adjustments, other than the initial 3% from last year, will be applied April 1st, 2024. So we have ensured that we have applied all $11.4 million to salary scales for our members. Different occupational groups and classifications did receive different market adjustments based on the previous criteria that we mentioned. Initially, the employer wanted to hold back about 10% as a slush fund, but we were adamant that this all be spent and applied to our members' salaries.
Perfect. So just want to recap some of the key implementation dates. As we know, over the last few minutes, there's been a lot of dates and how it's all going to apply for all the different variety of payments that are going to be coming back. So just to go back, April 1st, 2024, that's the date of standardization for respiratory therapy and pharmacy and all other additional market adjustments. That's the date that that's going to be implemented. As indicated, the July 14th, 2023, which is our date of ratification, that 3% initial market adjustment that took place on October 1st will extend back to that date. And lastly, our standardization will go back to April 1st, 2023. So I know the burning question now is, when am I going to get paid? We've agreed that 60 days from when the wage scales are completed by the employer and signed off by both parties, that 60 days, the time will start ticking in order for implementation and for retro payments to come to us. We just want to put out a friendly reminder to everyone that all retro payments are subject to applicable payroll taxes and union dues, as has always been the case.
So we may have folks out there who have switched employers since April 1st, 2023, or have retired. So the employer has created a form so that these folks can still make sure they get their retro payment. We have a link to the form on our website. The deadline to submit the application for retro is November 5th, 2024. So the link is there. Make sure you fill out those forms and get your money. And now we're going to go to the MHCP website to explain where to find information on your specific classification and what your salary scale will be.